go over, once again, what we all know, the famous English ditty. I'd also like to say that in the summer of 2008, as a result of the meeting that's been alluded to, Malaf and a member of Team Colors, Kevin Van Meter, and I, we formed a group to study the commons. I'd like to tell you some of the results of that. And then Francesca expressed a desire to join our group in an extraordinary letter, and I would like to try to answer one or two of the points of her letter. So that's what I would like to do. So first of all, you all, I hope, remember that the law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common, but lets the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose. Do you all know that? Yeah. Okay. Shall we go over it together then? Let's go over it together before you do it by yourself. The law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common, but lets the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose. Now, can we try it?
Acapella.
Law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from off the commons, but lets the greater villain loose who steals the common from the goose.
Good, good, very good. So I used to think this was English, but I discovered it of the 18th century, but actually it's Irish in the 17th century. Things like that give the professional historian, you know, paradise on earth. I thought of another thing I wanted to, that I didn't say I wanted to say, which is, at the time of the first counter-revolution, traditionally, after the French Revolution, which was the massive imposition of slavery and enclosures by state power across the Atlantic, north and south. In England, the Romantic movement arose in opposition to slavery and enclosure. Ever since then, Romantic has been a term of dirt from the ruling class. So there are some contradictions, of course, which we can find in the Romantic movement, but on the whole, they were opposed to prisons, slavery, and enclosure. So we can, yeah. The reason I start with that law locks up the man or woman who steals the goose from off the common is this. Since Elinor Ostrom won the Nobel Prize for her work on the governance of the commons, we can expect that the commons discourse will become even more tricky and more widespread. And therefore, I think it's essential for us who are building bridges among ourselves to make a class to overthrow this terrorist criminals of our ruling class. Oh dear. All that, and I forgot my thought, how that sentence began. Never mind. Let's go back to the poem. You see, many people think it's about geese. And others, which we can embrace. Others think it's about commoning, which we'll deal with, which we do. But Jenna reminds us that it's about prisons. The law locks up the man or woman. And it also asks us to think, who are the criminals? So I think the first, the point that I wish to make, and Francesca, is partly in answer to your letter, is that we can use the prison as a criterion for understanding the commons. If those who advocate commoning are also advocating the abolition of prisons, we can listen. Otherwise, I think we must beware of a forked tongue. This ditty teaches us that imprisonment and the loss of the commons came together. And therefore the abolitionist movement that we learned about, and by the way, the great prison building of the 1790s and right up through the Foucault era, if I can put it that way, you know, the great confinement of the 19th century. Oh, again, I forgot my sentence. Never mind. There's so much to say on this subject. There's another tool, Francesca, that I think I've started to think about that can help us. It's not the prison, but it's, or for me anyway, I picked this idea up from Magna Carta and the Charter of the Forest. We don't need to get into that particularly. I get into it because I think that the law is on our side. A lot of people think the law means do unto others as you do unto yourself. I mean, I was trained that way, but I overthrew that with Marxism when I learned that law was the ruling class, wish of the ruling class, but now I'm back to the other. Okay, so I think this law is very tricky, and so I studied the history about it. And what they said in those charters was that their reparations will be paid. The king stole the commons, he stole the forests, and they said that the forest must be returned. Not only the forest that bad King John took, but also that his father and his grandfather took. This is the principle of reparations. He must pay for harm done. He must redress the grievance. I try to think about this in terms of our discussion, that we don't want the capital as commons. We want that capital returned to us as our commons. In other words, that old expression of expropriate the expropriators, again, it's a bit tricky, but I believe if you stop and think about it, it means their class has stolen from ours. That's, you know. And therefore, I think the prison and the principle of reparations, if we don't hear those in the same breath that we hear commoning talk, we must beware. I'm not saying it's, I'm not sure about this, Sylvia. I'm not sure about it, and don't feel doctrinaire about it at all. And I haven't thought it through, but I think we need to think it through, and it perhaps might help us. Do I have another minute or two?
Yep.
Okay. Now here comes the difficult part for me. Up in Ann Arbor, we have the Gray Panthers. I don't really know them. Also, we have the Liberty Street agitators, where we stand holding signs, you know, for health care or against war, that kind of thing. And right across the street, they're digging an underground parking lot. But what are they going to do on the top of the parking lot? Some people have got together and said, we want to have a commons there. And they're trying to rope me into it, and rope Magna Carta and all that, and, you know, you and everything, and make it big rhetoric about the commons. And I'm a little uneasy. I'm not quite sure why, but I am. Anyway, they said to me, Pete, would you write us the principles of the commons? So I did. Now, I haven't approved this through the Midnight Notes Censorship Bureau. But anyway, I do have some principles of the Commons, and I put my name on it. It's not the Midnight Nose name. But what I'd like you to do, I'd like to, there's just a few here. I wish there was more. I'd like to pass this out for your consideration.